evening to our team from Singapore, and good morning, good afternoon to our teams from Africa side. My name is Anne. I'm speaking to you from Nairobi. It's in Kenya. And along with me is my large crew of Africa team, both from our different OCs and our HQ team that supports us on the ground. So I think I'm going to thank all of you for taking the time to be with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening. We'll be sharing this session along with my colleague in South Africa. He's called Kujo. He'll also come in and do a bit of sharing. And so before I start, I want to just mention a few administrative, I'd say, guides, and then we'll jump into the program in itself. So the first thing is you will note that you're all muted. But what will happen is, in case you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to capture them on the Q&A session. Also want to make a kind appeal that we will be recording the session for the sake of, just information capturing this engagement, and also even just some of which will be shared with yourselves to help you continue just appreciating what we'll be speaking about. So we hope you're okay with that. At a point in the presentation as well, we'll capture some of the pictures. Just want to mention to you so that you're at least aware of the kind of recording, kind of capturing we'll have. Speaking to the program for the day so that we're able then to follow through, I'll do I've just done the quick housekeeping part. And after this, I'll do a very quick recap of this presentation. And I'm doing this recap because this is the second of two sessions that we did on the transport and logistic space. Last month, same time, same day, 20th, we had a presentation by our West and Central Africa Business Development Head, Jeanette, along with the North Africa team, Salu. And they spoke about the area of land and rail. Myself and Kujo will then be focusing on port and air. Then once I go through a quick recap, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Kujo, to take us through the space of port, look at the landscape, speak to the trends, speak to some of the projects to then bring out and highlight the kind of opportunities that we are able to then pick from there. I'll then come in and take us through the air side, a similar flow. What's the landscape like? What are the projects? Just highlighting what we can open up from there. Then after that, we'll open up to a more detailed session where we have a very, very rich panel of good friends, good networks of ours, some of whom are companies within Singapore. We have Crimson Logic, we have Mitchell Ports, we have Changi Airport International, we have Astra Aviation. We also have a representation from the South Africa Freight Forwarders Association, both Ms. Juanita and Mr. Jacob. So they'll take us through a session where we'll now look at on the ground what's happening, what opportunities are there, because the idea is to just give you as much information as you can. And then at a point, we'll then have a Q&A where you give us all the questions you have. To the extent that we'll be able to speak to this, we will then speak to them. And the target is that by 6 p.m. Singapore time, we'll be done with the presentation. So I'm going to jump in and give a quick recap on what's happening on Africa side. First thing I want to mention is, please note, Africa is 54 separate countries with different nuances and all that, different ways of life. But what we've done as the Enterprise Singapore is then break them down into 4 regions, which I'll mention very quickly. So some of the things that maybe just a few updates around Africa, the population, 1.4 billion, expected to hit 2.4, which only shows you the level of potential within the region. And of course, our mandate is then to change that potential and realize it. Strong GDP at about 3.1 trillion. Then the key economic drivers is the natural resources within the region. A lot of these countries have an agricultural skew. We have some which also have the mining side, the oil and gas, so much potential within the region. We've seen tech hubs coming up within this region, a lot of eyes looking at the tech space. Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa leading around this. We've seen fintechs developing, mobile money flowing, which all just open access of flows, be of money, of goods. And one major theme you'll see going throughout this presentation is the impact and the level of investment in infrastructure, including ports, rails, roads, which speaks then to then what kind of opportunities open up within this transport and logistics space. It's not all, happy and, because we do have challenges. There are areas of debt levels. political instability, infrastructure gaps, and these gaps also then, of course, translate into opportunities. So what we've done as Enterprise Singapore to optimally look at these opportunities, then we've blocked it out so that we're able to follow up on each of the different blocks. Like I said, I sit in Nairobi within the East African region with my regional director, Lien. We have a team that sits in Accra that looks at West and Central, and we have a team that sits in South Africa that looks at the South African region. Our North Africa piece is looked at by our Dubai office. And in further optimizing, what we do is then identify priority markets within the region. So areas like Egypt is a key market within the Northern Africa region, Morocco, a bit more opportunistic. In the east side, we have Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. When we look at the South Africa side, there is South Africa, Mozambique, Angola. And on the west side, we have Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire. And these are areas or regions or economies where we see opportunities that are at maturity levels that align to what Singapore is looking at with regards to the opportunities. For today, however, our focus, like we said, is the transport and logistics space, zeroing in on port and air. So at this point, I'll pass to my colleague, Kujo, who will take us through the opportunities. First, a quick feel of what's the logistic like, the space in itself, and then drill down to the port space. So I think passing it over to you, Kujo. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Good morning, colleagues, and good afternoon to the friends and colleagues that are in Singapore. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm Kujo from Enterprise Singapore Joburg office, looking after the Southern African market. So I will take you through, as Anne said, the port and marine logistics portion of the presentation. But before that, let us take a quick look at some of the key drivers influencing the growth of the sector on the continent. We've got rapid urbanization and customer demand, increasing the need for last mile delivery services, as well as the rise of e-commerce platforms across the continent. Then we've got significant developments in transport infrastructure, including ports, railway lines, roads, airports, which all contribute to improving connectivity across the continent. Then we've got regional integration through various trade blocs such as SADC or SADC, the COMESA, ECOWAS, and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is expected to increase intra-Africa trade by 28% by year 2030. We've got rising trade volumes, both regionally as well as Africa integrating into global supply chains. And that requires both, inland as well as marine logistics services. And that's where guys like yourselves will be critical in supporting us to work around that. And then lastly, we've got the adoption of digital transformation technology, things like tracking systems, warehouse management, software, blockchain, all of which are designed to improve efficiency of the sector. And next slide, please. One after this one. Perfect, thanks. So now I will take you through the overview of the logistics sector in terms of ports, as well as some of the key trade routes in and around Africa. Just to highlight some of the major ports across the continent. In North Africa, we've got major ports such as Port Said in Egypt, Tengamed in Morocco, as well as Port of Algiers in Algeria. Down in Southern Africa, we've got Durban, Cape Town, and Saldanha Bay ports, all of which are within South Africa and are some of our major ports. But we've also got Walvis Bay in Namibia, as well as Maputo in Mozambique. And, both these ports have experienced an increase in trade flows, as well as traffic towards the ports, particularly because of some of the challenges that Transnet is going through in South Africa. So we're seeing guys diverting cargo from South Africa to both Maputo and Walvis Bay. Then we've also got the Lobito port in Angola, backed by the Lobito Corridor development, which facilitates the movement of particularly minerals, copper, cobalt, as well as inflows of sulfur into the DRC and Zambia and out of those two countries. particularly the copper as well as the cobalt, which is exported towards Lobito and for exports to markets around the world. That is an ongoing development, and it is expected to increase the flows of cargo in and out of the region. In East Africa, major ports are Mombasa and Dar es Salaam. They look after not only the two countries, Kenya and Tanzania, but the rest of East Africa as well. And lastly, in West Africa, we've got major ports such as Apapa and Lekki in Nigeria, Tema in Ghana, as well as Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. Now, in terms of key trade routes, African ports serve as critical nodes for regional as well as international trade. As an example, particularly with the growing trade between China, India, and East African countries like Kenya and Tanzania. But not only those countries, but also neighboring countries that may be landlocked and towards the center of Africa as well. We've got the East-West corridor that facilitates commerce between Asia and Europe, passing through key transit points in the Middle East as well as Africa. Then we've got the North-South corridor, which is a key trade network that connects northern and southern regions and into Europe as well as the Americas. And lastly, we've got the intra-African trade routes that serve regional trade within the continent. And next slide, please. Now, in terms of investments, FDI inward into the continent, folks, and particularly into logistics, there has been significant investments into African ports towards, if you look at around the world, most of the investments in ports have been towards Africa as well as Latin America. But now particularly for Africa, destination for those investments include, if you look at the photograph on the left-hand side of your screen where there's a map, you will see that the big numbers 1, 2, 3, that's Morocco, Egypt, and South Africa, which have received most of the FDI towards ports in Africa. In West Africa as well, we've got Togo, Nigeria, and Ghana being big recipients, but as well as Kenya representing East Africa. Now, these investments have increased container throughput from 24.5 million TEUs to 35.8 million TEUs across the continent. And this has been the trend between the decade 2011 and 2021. Now, as well as the emergence of hub ports that serve the hinterlands or as crucial transshipment hubs for transfer of goods to smaller ports within the continent. Further investments going forward or in the next few years even are expected. There are new terminals that have been already approved for development. If I can just give a couple of examples, there's going to be an LNG terminal in South Africa. Port of Point No in the DRC is going to be developed, as well as a new food terminal in Maputo. Next slide, please, sister. Now, another significant development that we are seeing, colleagues, is international operators looking to secure concessions in Africa for management of ports. And if we can just cite a few of these examples, we've got the signing of an MOU between Ibis-Tech and Yilport Holdings from Turkey for the operation of the Takoradi port in Ghana. In South Africa, we've got the selection of ICTSI from the Philippines as a preferred bidder to join hands with Transnet to form a JV, which will operate the Durban container terminal Pier 2. That, however, has gone through challenges. It's actually going through courts as we speak. But this is just to show as an example of the trend of concessioning of ports in Africa. Then we've got qualification tenders issued by the Kenya Ports Authority for development and operation of the Lami Container Terminal, the Lamu Special Economic Zone, and Mombasa Port Container Terminal 1. In Nigeria, we've got approval by the Federal Executive Council for renovation and expansion of the Buruntu Port in Delta State. We've got the development of the Ondo multi-purpose deep sea port, and the expansion of the Snake Island terminal in Lagos, all of which are built around the PPP model, public-private partnerships. Then lastly, we've got the signing of the 30-year concession between DP World and the Tanzania Port Authority to operate the multi-purpose Dar es Salaam port. And that operation, I understand, is already ongoing. Now, moving into key projects and some of the opportunities that we are seeing that you guys might want to look out for. In East Africa, Mombasa is the largest and busiest port and serves as a vital gateway, for several landlocked countries in East and Central Africa. Potential opportunities there could include port operatorship or port concessioning, digitization to enhance efficiency, as well as training and capacity development. In West Africa, Lekki is the first deep sea port in Nigeria and is well positioned as a transshipment hub for neighboring countries. And their opportunities that we're seeing include digitization to enhance efficiency, as well as supply chain optimization, to reduce transit times, which is a key theme or a common theme in terms of challenges around the continent. Transit times that are longer than they should be. Again, down in Southern Africa, Port of Durban remains the busiest and most significant in the region, despite all of their well-documented challenges. Immediate opportunities there really are more related to infrastructure development. Just to cite a couple of examples, berth deepening, there's a tender out for that. There's also a potential development of a new agriculture terminal. So only once those requisite infrastructure projects have been completed, we can start talking about other opportunities like digital transformation. That's the sense that we're getting from the industry. But something like capacity development, we can already start seeking opportunities around that as well. And in North Africa, Tenga is the premier industrial port complex, strategically positioned on the Strait of Gibraltar. And some opportunities there are related to renewable energy, wherein we can support them, with their sustainability commitments. And lastly, from my side, this slide is just to give a highlight of some of the players that are playing in this market in Africa and across the value chain. You will see that there are already international terminal operators like DP World, like APM Terminals. But what we're seeing is that regional or country port authorities such as Transnet in South Africa, Namport in Namibia, they've still got a stronghold on port operations. So while we mentioned in the presentation that port concessioning is a trend, it's a slow progress and it will continue to be slow, but it's steady. That's what we can say. And there are some Singapore presence. You can see this PIL there. We've got Crimson Logic, who we're honored to have in the webinar. But obviously, as Enterprise Singapore, we are working towards having a lot more Singapore presence and participation in the sector to help us improve it and thereby build some of the African economies. And over to you. Can take us through the air logistics portion.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Really appreciate that update on the port side. So I'll just jump into the air side, speak to similar things, just a quick feel, like an overview of what's happening on air side. The air side is not as developed, or the happenings within that side are not as exciting as on the port side, but we've seen the emergence of cargo hubs, and they are emerging, across, key areas within Africa. The Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is one major hub that we've picked within the region. Then we've got Egypt, the Cairo International Airport. We've got Oliver Tambo in South Africa. We've got Ethiopia as well coming in strongly within the East Africa side. On West, we have the MMA in Lagos. So we have hubs coming up, and what hubs do then? There are areas that allow for that transshipment from such areas or movement of cargo from the hubs into the hinterlands, into the more probably areas that may not have similar hubs within the region. And according to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, the passenger and freight traffic in Africa is expected to increase annually by about 4.3 to 3.9%, which is quite high when you compare with the global increase. So while we've seen significant increase, especially on the passenger side, and yeah, there is increase on cargo side, when you compare globally to the amount with regards to air freight in tons per km, Sub-Saharan Africa is still very, very far behind. We are seeing areas like East Asia and Pacific region, as of 2021 was at high, at 71,000 freight in ton per km. And when you compare with Sub-Saharan at about 4,300, then you can see the big area, or rather how far behind Africa is, but also translating in the kind of potential we'd be looking growth with regards to the passenger, especially with regards to the cargo movement within the region. Like I mentioned, there's a lot with regards to all these growths that relate to infrastructure development, because this is one of the key drivers of the growth we've seen in the air side. So one of them is the rising demand for air travel. We've seen a number of countries going to maybe middle class level. We've seen passengers growing. There's an appreciation of, movement, air movement. Tourism has also grown, and business travel, which then speaks to the growth in passenger numbers. When you look at the infrastructure development, new airports and terminals have been upgraded, a lot of enhancing of operations. So as requirements or as expectation of users of these solutions grow, companies are then being forced to look at what next can we do to make our offering meet client needs, meet the capacity growth. So we've seen a lot of development and upgrades. We've also seen cargo and trade growing. Major airports, the way we said, Jomo Kenyatta, in Lagos we have the Murtala Muhammed, in Addis we have Bole. There's a lot of growth of trade and cargo movement, which then pushes the need for infrastructure development. When we look at regional connectivity, another key driver of the growth in numbers of cargo and passengers, we've seen the open skies and single Africa air transport market opening up and creating opportunities for increased connectivity, currently with 34 African countries participating. And of course, what this does, because some of the discussions around such open skies is that you remove barriers. So then travel is easier, and then we see growth of movement within the air. Then we've also seen strong national carriers expanding their footprints within the region. We've seen like Ethiopian Airlines really looking to grow and connect to hubs so that also frees up or facilitates movement of cargo, movement of people within the airspace. So these are some of the key drivers within the airspace. When we pick out the project, I must mention, projects are many. However, we picked out the highlights to help us just give a feel of what kind of opportunities we're looking at within this region. So we have the Lagos Airport. They've gotten into technical contract for airport operations, targeting 4 key airports in Nigeria. We've got Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and Kaduna, in partnership with CIFEX Global. So what happens is the minute such partnerships happen, they open up opportunities across the value chain. The Bole International Airport in Ethiopia, we've seen infrastructure developments aimed at expanding and modernizing the airport facilities. So we've seen, Ethiopia Cargo has significantly invested in enhancing the logistics. So what happens is opportunities to be it automate or enhance the operations and the experience for clients within the cargo handling space, be it warehousing and other logistic services, then realize a growth, and then also opens up opportunities for e-commerce growth. When we look at the South Africa side, we have the Cape Winelands Airport. There's a redevelopment project, which is being led by Cape Winelands Aero and guided by Netherlands. So whenever, and especially when there are such projects that also tap into the international capabilities, we see a lot of requirement of benchmarking to such capabilities, which then also opens up opportunities for benchmark solutions like we know Singapore has. And on the north side, we'll be looking at the Egypt Airports PPP project, private partnership project that is looking at 5 key airports. We've got the Cairo International Airport, we have Sphinx, we have El Alamein, we have Sharm El Sheikh and Hurghada. All these developments, like we said, any infrastructure enhancement, any need that will then bring to automation, to enhancing services, opens up opportunities within the different projects. These are just key highlights of the many different projects we've seen within the region, most of which we are looking to open up opportunities for partnership. So maybe just to speak about some of the players that are already taking advantage of such opening. We have our very own Singapore Airlines, the cargo airline. We've got FedEx, we've got Emirates, we've got the usual names, the mass such names within. But we've also seen on the regional side a number of, most national carriers, for example, Kenya Airways under their Kenya Cargo brand, Ethiopia Airlines. We've got Allied, we've got Astra Cargo, South Africa as well. Most of the national carriers also offer support on the cargo side. And we also have a few private ones. For example, we've got Astra Aviation that also facilitates cargo movement. A lot of the other names will have been mentioned by Pujo with regards to freight forwarders, as well as by Jeanette last month when she was taking us through the land opportunities, land and rail. So usual names, we have the DHLs within the NAGELs within the global part. Regionally, we have, companies like AMI, we have Kerry Logistics. All these are companies that play within the freight forwarding space. Ground handling on the global side, we have companies that like Worldwide Flight Services. On the regional part, once again, some of the cargo flights themselves, Ethiopia Airlines. We have the Aero Africa, Consolidating Africa. So we have, and then on the logistics side, once again, we have a few players in the global space, as well as some like the East Africa Consolidators, Greenpoint, Freight Services. You'll also note some of these names flow from both freight forwarding to ground handling to logistics, because a number of these companies actually play across the whole value chain. So while we do have all these opportunities, we also need to be aware that there are challenges. The beautiful thing is our economies are looking to get mitigation strategies towards some of these challenges. One of the major challenges is high costs. So high costs affect be it land, be it rail, be it port, be it air. Especially air, we've noted, some of these require high insurance premiums because of conflict zones. There's fuel scarcity, low demand, so that translates into a cost. We also have the issues of fragmented or opaque information and data, which makes it hard to get some of this data. And this data also helps with some of the solutions we have, be it tracking systems. So when there's a gap in that, then there's a gap in the kind of solutions we're able to bring, but the mitigations being built will help enhance such areas and gaps. Infrastructure gaps are pretty much the ones that are then bringing up the need to have developments and therefore opening up opportunities. We also have bureaucratic hurdles, a very major pain within the African space. We have areas of custom delays, tariff barriers, trade flows being blocked across the different countries. But with such areas, then we see companies coming in to offer solutions. I know part of our panel today, there's a company that has helped offer such solutions, and we'll hear a bit more around such. And of course, there's a big pain around insecurity, be it in pilferage, piracy, cyber security. So what happens is insecurity then goes and impacts on the cost. So it's really a lot of areas of challenge, but translating to opportunities for solutions to be put to help reduce these challenges. So what happens is, even as we get to see the numbers, Africa is definitely, and especially within the Africa space, be it North, South, Sub-Sahara, is definitely lagging quite a bit with regards to logistic performance index. We're actually, lagging at the back. But what we're hoping is that the minute we have partnerships with companies like, the Singapore solutions that come in, we'll be able then to enhance the operations of some of these ports and air and, the entire logistics space. Some of the mitigations that governments are bringing in is areas like, international partnerships, investing in areas like naval patrols, surveillance and technology, and stricter port regulations. We've seen the AU, and along with regional organizations, working on joint security initiatives. We've also seen a gradual embrace of AI-driven surveillance, blockchain for cargo tracking. So we've seen some of these solutions coming in, which then makes it a ground that a number of our Singapore solutions can explore for partnerships. So at this point, you'll allow me, before we jump into our panel session, allow me to just give an update of a mission we are looking to have later in the year, in October. The mission is targeted to go to West and East Africa. And the idea is to take advantage of some of the areas or growth areas that we have mentioned. The target will be 20th to that week of 20th of October, but we will give the exact dates and the exact information as we move on. The idea for now is just to alert you that there is this mission, so that even as you make your plans and the budgeting for the year, you can plug this into the planning. Target is to engage with freight forwarders, transport companies, warehousing companies, log tech companies, electric mobility companies, as well as e-commerce companies. Some of the companies we've mentioned there, some of whom we'll be talking to this afternoon, evening, as we go through our panel session. And so just wanted to mention that. I know my HQ colleague, Sophie, will be doing a poll for us to get a feel of what the thoughts are of our participants. And once we get through the poll, we'll jump into the panel session with our panelists. Sophie, I think I'm going to give it for like 10 seconds. I think our 10 seconds are over, and I want to believe we've been able to run the poll to give our responses. Your responses help a lot with regards to helping support our internationalization journey, as well as seeing what markets are you interested in. Will you be interested in the mission? If not, what else would you be looking to do? So please do give us your responses. But for now, what I'll do, I'll move to our panel discussion. Maybe just to give a think of how we'll run the panel discussion, because I know we have. I'm going to give each of our panelists 2 minutes to please give a quick, brief introduction of your company, which place you play in, so that once we are done with that, I'll request the team as well as the panelists that we kindly first look at the air side, so that we're able to just manage that flow of questions and not confuse the two different areas. So we look at the air side. Then, of course, move over to the port. No, we'll start with the port side, then move to the air side, so that we're able to flow the discussion well. So at this point, I'm just highlighting the team that will be taking us through this panel session. We have companies from Singapore who have walked the internationalization journey into Africa. We have companies within Africa, and we are very lucky also to have a Freight Forwarders Association to give us a feel from a general member level. I'm going to right now start ladies first. So I'll start with Ms. Juanita. You can give us an introduction. Who is SAFFA? Do an introduction as well as with Jacob. Then we'll move to the next panelist. So thank you all once again for joining us for this panel. Over to you, Ms. Juanita. And for our panelists, I'm going to request you please remember to unmute and please put on your video so that we can be able to engage and move on. Thanks.
It's Juanita Maria, and I give you warm greetings. I'm currently in Geneva, so it's about 4 degrees Celsius. But it's for us a pleasure and an honor to engage with you and your colleagues. We are an association that's more than 100 years old in South Africa. We have around about 381 members, which contribute or which control 90% of the flow into South Africa and out of South Africa, and also intra-Africa trade. And we are very passionate about the logistics network, and you will heard when we communicate with you is how do we keep the logistics network intact? What is the demonstrated capacity, and how can we work together? So thank you with that, and thank you very much for inviting us. It's a pleasure.
Okay, Jacob, you want to go next?
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. In addition, what Unita said, once again, thank you for hosting us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. As Unita said, we are very keen to keep the network intact. And of course, it's a global space that we all connect in. And it's very important to keep that in mind. And with that, partnership is very important. As SARF, we are the chair of the Fiat Arami region, so the region Africa and Middle East. We're also the chair of the World Customs Organization East and Southern Africa regional private sector group that looks at 24 countries in East and Southern Africa. And along with that, as we are here currently in Geneva, we are very active in the international space, our international counterpart being FIATA. So it's very important to collaborate across countries, across regions, and keep our drive to keep the logistics network intact. A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Jacob. Chibun, next, Crimson Logic.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are. My name is Chibun, representing Crimson Logic. I'm sitting here currently in Singapore now. And as Crimson Logic, we are a subsidiary of PSA, which is one of the largest port operator in the world. As Crimson Logic, as an organization, we have 37 years of experience in public sector digitizations. Essentially, we help governments with their digital transformations. Specifically, for Crimson Logic, we began our journey into Africa since 1994, starting with Mauritius, where we share our Singapore experience and have helped the Mauritian government develop their national single window platform. And from there, we have moved on to implement other trade and public sector digital projects in various parts of Africa. In the sub-Sahara Africa, in the north or northeast side, where you probably will classify in the east, that we have projects in Djibouti. And in the eastern part of Africa, we have presence in Kenya and Rwanda. In the south, we have project experience in Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Madagascar, Malawi. And also in the west, we have projects done in Ghana, Ivory Coast. And I'm also happy to share with the latest additions, we'll be doing our projects in Nigeria as well. So essentially, trade facilitations is in our blood as an organization. And we are very honored to be able to partner together with various countries and the governments to contribute to their efficiencies in terms of their regulatory process for the trade enhancement. So happy to share the experience here, and thank you, ESG, for this opportunity.
Thanks, Chibun. Mr. James, Raria.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
This is James Raria from Mitchell Court in Mombasa, 34 degrees at the moment, guys. So I'm not really enjoying the weather at the moment, but anyway, glad to be here. Mitchell Courts Logistics, Mitchell Courts Freight Kenya Limited is a name that has been in this region since 1926, but as a freight logistics operator since 1987. So we are a regional integrated logistics services provider within the region. We operate ICDs, we operate a special economic zone with an FTZ. We also provide out-of-gauge cargo movement as a special terrestrial transport provider, and a whole array of freight forwarding opportunities at a regional level. And yes, we are indeed interested and happy to participate in this conference because, as my previous speakers have alluded to, opportunities for partnerships, as you've seen with all the global trends and shipping lines getting into terrestrial operations, and therefore players like ourselves availing ourselves also for such partnerships with other non-affiliated, non-line affiliated organizations that we can partner with. So I'm happy to be here to share our experience, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, James. Roy?
Hi there. Thank you very much, Anne. Thanks for having me on this panel. So my name is Roy. I'm Director of International Projects at Changi Airports International. I believe most of you will be familiar with my parent company, Changi Airport Group, that manages and operates Changi Airport itself. With the international arm, we provide management consulting services for airports around the world. We've got a good track record in Asia Pacific and Middle East, and in more recent years, we have ventured into Africa. So we have had projects in Ethiopia, Nigeria, Angola, and Guinea. So let's talk more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think even for our participants with us, just mentioning and just celebrating the fact that we do have Singapore companies that have come in, have walked the journey, have gone through the nuances of Africa and are realizing success after success, even as they partner with our strong companies on the ground. I'm going to start with you, Chibun. You've just mentioned you've walked the journey, you internationalized quite a long time ago. I'm sure you've had your successes. Maybe just sharing what that journey was, mentioning the pluses as well as the challenges that you've walked as you got into this region, Africa.
Well, as you mentioned, the continent is big and wide, make up of 54 countries. So everyone have their own culture, everyone have their own needs, and one is not the same. Everyone is different. But it also is been helpful because as a continent, there are many countries, and at any one time, there must be one that will be like-minded, that they want to have some sort of efficiencies improvement. So I would say one of the key challenge going in from our perspective in terms of the digitizations would be getting the right mindset who wants to go into that efficiency mode. Because as you know, in any country that is developing, there will be challenges trying for them to adopt into new mode of working with digitizations. And some will deem with digitizations, it comes with transparency and would be deemed as a threat to their livelihood. So getting to the right audience, getting the right alignments, and having the right champion, I think that is that key issues. Even when you win the projects, when come to actual implementation, and this is through experience, you face roadblocks after roadblocks after roadblocks. People are trying to derail the projects. So, I mean, then that's where that Singapore ethos really comes in. We will overcome any kind of challenges that comes to it. And of course, together with the support from the stakeholder and the political master, that is where we can safely say that we are able to achieve the objective of the project and do good to the country. So essentially, the opportunity is plentiful, but we must have the gumptions to really overcome the challenges. And also one thing I also learned is that once you have been able to prove to the country or to the client that we can do it and give them the right solutions, it just success begets success, and we can bring more success into the future.
So from your journey, maybe you can just give a feel of the importance of partnerships as you're working to manage some of these challenges that you've mentioned.
Sorry, again?
Just wanted to get your feel as you journeyed and based on the experience you've had, the importance of local partners on the ground. Is it important? Do you need one? Does it help?
Okay. Regarding for local partnership, from our experience, it cuts both ways. It is something that through due diligence, it is good you can find a local partner. But we also have experience that it becomes the local partner who drags you down, who ultimately it doesn't go about in the right directions. But coming back, I mean, Africa ultimately it is the terrain. I would say coming from Singapore, the African terrain, it is not something for the faint-hearted. Hence, I would say that partnership is still the right way to go. I mean, from higher probability of success rate perspective. So I would say that partnership is still important, but do the due diligence. Not all partnerships will bring you to the right destinations. You really need to go in with the eye open. But overall, yes, partnership is important, at least for the first time for you to navigate the landscape. I mean, as Crimson Logic, maybe just to share a bit is from now, even for ourselves now, we are also very mindful. Some projects, I think it's better for us to go in directly to cut off the various layers. So it cuts both ways. But for first timer, partnership is definitely important.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Chipun. That's really helpful. I'm gonna go to James, and I'll pick this one as being a beneficiary of some of Crimson Logic's solutions, not necessarily for the Kenya one, but we know they've been giving solutions with regards to trade and single window. Just wanted to know, have these had an impact on your operations at Mitchell Courts?
Yes, I mean it's an obvious yes for me. We saw Crimson Logic involved in the national single window initiative in Kenya, which has been a big boon for us as operators, because as Chibun has talked about, bringing visibility into the transaction process when it came especially to transactions involving government, a myriad of government organizations put together on one platform, and we're able then to basically hold different government bodies to account. And that has not just benefited Mitchell Courts, it has benefited the whole industry as such. We could see that one of the direct impacts of this was the reduction of the dwell time of cargo in the port as a result of a transparent cargo clearance process. I used to work in the port when the dwell times were between 11 to 15 days, and that has come down to probably around 3 days or so. So you can actually see the benefits of that aspect within our industry and our country as at large. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Now let me ask, what other innovations and trends are you seeing being picked up within the industry and as well as by Mitchell Courts?
Digitization has had a huge impact for us. The key thing here is communication and visibility. Track and trace opportunities that, in this part of the world were taken for things for granted. You waited and waited to see when your cargo would come and, pray a bit that it actually comes to pass. But now you have all these visibility opportunities, and the fact that we have a young population, not just in Kenya, but within the Africa region, that has actually embraced, technology and adapting to these things very well as compared to the likes of us who have been in the game a little bit longer, but trying to adapt. So that has been a very key element, that digitization, the visibility, having, state-of-art WMS solutions, everything driving efficiency, and that aspect of accountability that has been lacking in past transactions, making things very, very easy for both the customer and the service provider.
Okay. Thanks, James. I'll draw this now to Ms. Juanita. Maybe you'll guide me whether it's Dr. Jacob or Ms. Juanita. Just wanted to find out, from a member point, are we seeing this generally being absorbed, like with regards to the digitization and such innovations? Is that running the same across the members of SAFFA?
Yeah, maybe I can go, and then I want Jacob to add. Maybe for us, what we see our members is that they understand there's a design capacity in the logistics network. The design capacity will be on the ports, the rail, the air, and then the plane. And as you know, I do, supply chains cannot handle with waste or friction or stoppage. The moment we stop a supply chain in terms of waste, friction, and stoppages, we impact the demonstrator capacity. And that is detrimental, because then the trade cannot flow as it planned to flow. And then we come to the heart of supply chains. We influence the resilience and the sustainability of supply chains. And I think Singapore is really a case study for us on what they've done in single window, because with single window, they bring back the transparency, they bring back the transaction with the entity and the legal environment. And that's why we were so exciting to see that Singapore are finding some interest in Africa, because then you can bring the soft skills and the technology and the digitalization into supply chain. Because one would think supply chains are very digitalized of the nature, but it's not, because you work with multinationals, you work with a local authority, you work with SMEs, small companies, and the level of digitalization is not all the same. But the supply chain is a chain. It's a chain of role players. It's a chain of events. And that's why digitalization is so important, because it can help us to remove the waste and the friction. And I would definitely, if there's one desire in my heart, then it will be to take the lessons learned from Singapore, take the single window that Mombasa, Charles is speaking to, and Crimson, to bring it back into our 54 countries in Africa, because have a world where you imagine single window and we can talk to each other and we have transparency. It will be incredible. But I will stop here. Maybe Jacob wants to add something. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Junita. I think some very pertinent points. I want to frame this response in the sense that Junita mentioned earlier the fact that we, as the freight forwarding industries, we are the backbone of driving international trade. So I think it's very important to remember that. In that, why are we here? We are all here because we want socioeconomic growth and development in our region, in Africa. So a significant driver of that is, of course, your functioning logistics network. And then obviously the ability of companies and countries to partake within global value chains and global supply chains. So it's very important to realize that, because growth and development and logistics have a very circular and positive bi-directional flow. In order to grow and develop, we need, of course, functioning logistics networks. But of course, as we grow, the demand gets higher and higher. And just some comments in terms of South Africa specifically, and then I'll go on to the region, and some very pertinent points already mentioned by James, is the fact that in South Africa, which is of course still the gateway to the Southern African region, in global terms, we are a relatively small economic country, about 0.5% of global GDP, but we are a very open economy, which is the case with many of the economies in our region. We do a lot of trade. About 64% of South Africa's GDP has got a trade component, and that's true for many of the countries in the rest of our region. So it just means that we are highly dependent on a functional logistics network, and I think the same is true really in Africa, but it's in a sense that we are not participating as much in global value chains, because in Africa still about 80% of the trade in volume happens on the land borders. We have many land-linked countries in Africa, but we've got this amazing dream with the AfCFTA, and this is really our opportunity. James mentioned the fact that it's a market wanting to boom. We've got 1.3 billion people in Africa waiting to participate in global value chains. So some of the significant drivers are, of course, logistics network. So with that said, it's very important to the low-hanging fruit jump on that, and some of that are some of the comments already mentioned. It's the digitalization of the trade, it's the interoperability of the systems, the data sharing being in the same format, being very easily handled across borders. And I think we can take some very good examples from especially the East African community and their uptake, very significant uptake of digitalization. So I think that's very important for us, and that we have the excellent example from Singapore in the fact that, what we are trying to implement in Africa, and we just spoke about it here at the conference, is in terms of the customs declaration and the classification of products and goods and services. Singapore doesn't even have the need for clearing agents because your digital systems and platforms are so well defined and perfectly robust to allow just normal business people to almost do the function that takes a long time in Africa. And I think that's where we see significant opportunities with that. So some pertinent lessons to learn. I'll stop here. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks so much, Anita and Dr. Tingo. I'm going to jump back to James and ask you, so are there pointers with regards to stakeholders and value chain players that our Singapore companies need to cultivate with regards to now being able to in the logistics space?
Yes, in that regard, the challenge with a lot of the countries, at least in Africa, is there's an overarching what would I say, control from government, and you find various government bodies charged with responsibility. You have, say, for example, the Kenya Ports Authority that just runs the operations of the port, but also looking at becoming a landlord at some point in time, the Kenya Airports Authority, and a lot of all these other organizations. So at first level is to get inroads into this sort of, to understand who's controlling what bit of this pie, and what then we can do in terms of propositions to them. So government indeed plays a key role. So those are inroads that definitely, and with your networks, you should be able to break down. Then there's a second level of engagement, which are now the players in the various aspects, and that's where the key partnerships come in, because then holding hands at that level and then talking to government can unblock a lot of things and make them move forward. So there are a lot of, yes, international companies that have set camp and have established themselves well and can be able to do that, but as well as local players. And going back to Chibun's comment, you need to do a proper due diligence on who then you're working with, do your homework well. And yes, indeed, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's never a quick fix. You have to be patient. You have to plow. You have to, plow, cultivate, water, and then wait for the seed to germinate. But the fruits, as they can see with Crimson Logic and the single window project, the excellent results at the end of the day. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, James. Chibun, with an eye of Singapore, any other that a Singapore company needs to cultivate beyond like the government, any other cultivation our Singapore companies need to be aware of as they consider this journey?
I mean, the number one key things that I always see to coming into Africa has always been that regulatory compliance. I mean, to understand the government's needs from setting up company, the taxations, how you bring the cargo. on the regulatory side. But the other things that you really need to cultivate, at least from our perspective, is Africa is just booming. And who is the one that do all this trade? It is not the government, but it is the businesses and it is the people. And so it's really going in and to start understanding the culture of that 54 country, you have to pick one site that you want to start off with. And as ESG, you have rightfully painted it out, the north, east, south, west. I think all those every regions hold a very unique advantage, characteristic. So it's really picking one side to go in, and beside cultivating the government side, which I think the question is relating is who else? It is really that local businesses to know the local partners and to know who you can really partner with in the local terrain.
Thanks, Chibun. Dr. Jacob and Juanita, we've seen a lot of a big flow towards SEZs. And in fact, James, you've mentioned that yourselves, are developing an SEZ, have an SEZ. I wanted just to get some insights from Juanita and Dr. Jacob on, is that the same happening in South Africa? If that's the case, what opportunities are you seeing within that kind of development for possible for solutions from Singapore?
Yeah, you touch on something that's close to our heart, and that's the SEZs. I think when we look in South Africa is that for a long time, we did not understand the closeness between the logistics network and the trade flow. And I think the SEZs were bringing that concept very close to, you have a SEZ, but you need to link it to a trade corridor, or you need to link it to a strong logistics network. And we can see that also now in the rest of Africa, that you must maybe migrate to a freight village. And that's now the new name, to say that let we bring in freight villages, and it will attract more investment, because then you have a corridor, and the corridor will link to the import and export points. So, and we discussed it over the last 2 days as well in Geneva, is that now in Africa, it's not anymore the north-south corridor. We were very known to the north-south corridor. You see now east to west. And that's for us very prominent development, because now it's east to west. So you link the rail with the road and the ocean modality quite quicker. That is for us a very nice development. And also in that, if we take it further, the freight villages or the SEZs will help us, because the SEZs, what we can see, it links very much to the single window, because then you bring the entity, the transaction, and the legal layer closer to each other. Because to what James was saying earlier, and from Crimson Logistics, you bring transparency. And the moment you bring transparency, trade flourishes, because you remove all the unpredictability out of the system. So I think that's definitely, if you ask me the ideal picture in 2030, it will be very much corridor development with SEZs or freight villages, and you will find a very strong multimodal structure that's going to develop on a transparent single window or platform. And just to come back to a point that Crimson Logic and James has emphasized as well, it's the ethos of Singapore and the culture in Africa. I don't think we're so different, because we like to make sure that business is easy. We don't want corruption. We want a predictive process. We want quality in our processes. So I think it's for us as thought leaders to take those concepts, embed it, and drive it, because that brings us closer together. Not further, but closer together. And it might be a very good story if we plug that in cohesive building blocks. Thank you.
Thanks, Juanita. Maybe James, as you talk right now, and I know you play across a very large space of the whole logistics space plus the SEZ, you're talking to possible Singapore companies that will come and plug into possible areas that you are in pain. Just wanted you to share with us some of the areas you think or you see that already present within your projects opportunities for our Singapore companies.
Okay, very well. As I mentioned earlier, yes, we operate a special economic zone, one of the relatively, in fact, one of the smallest, because on this, our license is primarily a logistics platform, okay, just to enable companies access the region as opposed to the kind of barriers that they go through if then they have to go through the normal channels where you either direct cargo to a specific country, a specific location, and that comes with its barriers. So yes, in terms of opportunities, what you see out there is first of all technological partnerships, because as I have indicated earlier, there is a lot of I would say youth or a population that has become tech savvy, that wants things at the touch of a button, and yet solutions are largely lacking in various areas, and maybe even whatever we have might not be adequate in comparison to what would be available out there. So that is one area that I think is open for exploitation, largely because it is an untapped market. It is opening up. It is opening up because people have actually embraced technology in all aspects of their lives. Okay, and so that's one area of partnership. Then we look at all the trade aspects. There is a potential because of Singapore's position as a trade hub, as a transshipment port, with all the networks that arise from the Singaporean companies with the global connected to the global market. There is an opportunity then to tap into these businesses, into the supply chains, and basically form partnerships with regional or even country players that can then, expand or bring these global trade enterprises into the local market. You know that for us as Africa, we only contribute between 5 to 7% of the maritime global trade. Now, this is largely because what we're exporting out of this region is raw material. There's no value addition, including, for example, tea, of which my dear country, Kenya, is a leading global producer. And we are warehousing probably 30% of that product as a company. And so the SEZ has offered us an opportunity to go into value addition in terms of tea because of the packaging, the blending, and all that. So we want to take advantage of that. But again, we would need global partnerships to then help us access these networks out there. So these are just a highlight of some of the opportunities that will be available for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, James. At this point, first, I'll ask you, Roy, please forgive us for having put you out in the call. We want to now look a bit at the air side, the aviation side. So I'm going to ask a question like I asked Chibun. You've walked the journey into Africa. You have realized successes. Just want to, if you give our Singapore companies a feel of what that journey was like, the pluses, the challenges, so that we can be able to look at then how can we consider a similar journey.
Thank you very much. And no, don't worry about me. I was happy to be out in the cold, listening to topics and issues that I don't normally talk about. So it's interesting to hear what's going on in the sea freight side of things. So it's been so venturing into Africa is quite new for us, but it's been quite an interesting journey. I think, and just now you alluded to the fact that Africa is really one of the faster growing regions in the world in terms of air traffic, both passenger and cargo. I think it's definitely forecasted to grow faster than world average, maybe a bit behind Southeast Asia and South Asia, but certainly ahead of Europe, North America, and Latin America. So I think there are opportunities. And when you go into the different countries, you can feel a certain vibrancy, a certain energy and dynamism, and a confidence and a hope for the future. So I think all that points to the fact that there is really growth on the horizon, and it's good to go in at this moment, I think. And as well, I mean, of course, perhaps the environment may not be entirely ideal. Of course, I think various panelists and yourself as well, Anne, have talked about regulations and all that could be quite cumbersome. But I think governments are slowly opening up and taking the steps in the right direction. For example, we're talking about air services policies. Many countries are now signing up to SATAM, right, the single African air transport market. So with liberalization in the future, certainly that would allow airlines to fly more between African countries and so on. And that's only going to improve connectivity and trade and so on. I also echo Chibun's point that Africa is not for the faint-hearted. Apart from regulatory hurdles, there are also payment issues sometimes. In some countries, it's a bit difficult to get foreign currency out. So these are things that you need to consider.
Thanks a lot, Roy. I am going to apologize to Dr. Jacob. You had your hand up. I missed that. Please, just speak on what you wanted to mention.
Some excellent points made by all of the three colleagues that spoke before this quick response. I just wanted to mention that what Unita said, what James said, and now especially what Roy said, I think we must not, look too much at the challenges of Africa, but rather look at the opportunities. And significant opportunities are present, especially linking the network with the right products and the right sector, and then utilizing the SEZs. And a very good example is, and Roy just spoke about it, the growth in the air cargo market. In South Africa, we've seen international air cargo grow by 10% in the last year. And the same is true, I think, similar levels in East Africa. So we've got very good functioning air cargo hubs in some areas in Africa. And also, if we consider that the research points to the fact that there are very good opportunities in especially the light manufacturing space, which you could typically find in your SEZs, which are also typically shipped via air freight. So I think there are some obvious examples to utilize within this space. And I think that's what we have to look for in terms of these opportunities that are presented by linking the logistics with the commodities, with opportunities where there are growth, and there are most certainly growth. If we just consider the fact also to some of the comments James made earlier, Africa, does not necessarily trade with itself. The latest figures I saw is about 22% of African trade is intra-African trade. So there with the reduction of tariffs, and if we get digitalization working slightly better, Roy just mentioned permits, and we had a discussion yesterday with our colleagues from Singapore, incidentally, at the conference, to say that, typically in Singapore, the permits are almost instant. Whereas in Africa, we typically wait. If it's a day or two, that's still okay, but sometimes it's more than that. And I think these are the opportunities that we need to utilize because they are presented to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Jacob. Thanks to just Captain that, especially on the SEZ side. I'm going to go back to you, Roy, and just ask, we've had a few trends within the port side, digitization. What's trending? What's happening on the air side? What new trends are we seeing coming up? And then seeing how they will be adopted within the African space.
Sure. I think quite similar trends, to be honest. First off, maybe talking about the demand trend, I see air cargo as being extremely resilient through various crises, including the most recent COVID. Moving into the future, I think there will be long-term air cargo growth, as we all mentioned, but but there will be some, I think, near-term disruptions depending on how tariffs, war turns out. So we have to keep an eye on that. I would say digitalization is indeed helping air cargo in quite a big way as well, reducing processing times and of course, with greater efficiency, then it also helps to boost air cargo growth. And another one is multimodal cargo flows. And I think that also ties in with what everyone has been talking about the importance of SEZ. So we do see that airports around the world are trying to develop cargo villages where air freight, sea freight, land freight can sort of integrate quite seamlessly. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Roy. James and Unita or Dr. Jacob about what's green within logistics and what's happening on the green logistics space. What developments are around there? To the extent there's anything that's called green logistics in Africa. Exactly.
If I can maybe go, I think you're bringing very nice topics because you had digitalization and then it was SEZs and SECs and now it is the green. I think for me, and maybe I'm very simple, pragmatic, before we go to all the latest technology, we must really look inside Africa and say, what can we do to remove the standing time of the trucks, up the port productivity, and on the air cargo, make quick enter and exit points. So I think it's definitely, we want the green economy, but my thing would be very much, let we remove the long-standing queues and we up port productivity. And personally, if we get it right in Africa, we move a long way. But I will stop here. I must say, I like your topics tremendously because it touches on supply chain and it brings back what is the resilience and how can we build sustainability. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Anita. James, Dr. Jacob.
Dr. Jacob, will you go first or?
Please, James, go ahead. Please, James.
Excellent. I think one of the things that Bodila, because I can't pronounce the first name, you in your slides, you talked about developments within Africa. And one of the key developments that we have seen that will contribute to basically green logistics is the development of the railway networks. Okay. And this is a key aspect that we have to look at. Within Kenya, at least in the East African region, we see developments in Kenya, in Tanzania, and now with the linkages also being envisioned to Uganda and the region. So this is one key aspect, whether it had the green environment situation in mind or it's just a natural progression. That's a very, very key development, especially for traffic, at least in between the major cities of East Africa. But then, from our own perspective, we have seen more and more demand for us then to have all these ESG initiatives that align to obviously all the global targets from our customers. The waiting times, such stuff as monitoring our carbon footprint, stuff like that is coming up that is relatively new to us, a bit of a challenge, okay, because We are caught in between the bread and butter and between the good to have at the moment. So these are relatively new concepts that we are having to deal with at the moment, okay? But very much alive to that fact. And we have taken some of the initiatives. For example, in our warehousing aspects, we've gotten rid of 75% of our forklift diesel and gas forklifts to turn to electric forklifts. You know, just those basic steps that can show, you know, that we are alive to this and we are moving forward ahead with the globe. But still, a number of things that we need to be, we need our hand held in terms of, you know, even the measuring and everything. So we are still at policy level and developing that, you know, to practical aspect.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Thanks. That's really helpful. I know Doctor has something to say.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I can slightly elaborate on the very pragmatic responses by both UNITA and by James. And I think that's very true. We can sit in Africa and talk about the EU's ETS or the IMO's carbon regulations and talk about carbon credits and, you know, the global industry, they will shift to greener fuels. They will shift the on the ocean freight side to scrubber fitted vessels, to LNG fuels and all of that. But I think it's so pertinent that in Africa we get very practical and pragmatic and get our house in order. A very good example that James mentioned is the same is true in Africa. In South Africa, we've got a very large land surface area. We are about the size of France and Germany put together. So that means our freight demand on the surface side is very high. And we currently have a railway system that's very well developed. We've got, I think, the 13th largest network in the globe. But we lost a significant amount of, you know, tons on our rail network. For instance, a third of palletized tons could be on rail, which are not. So it's on the roadside. But added to what Unita said in terms of, you know, the waste and the friction in the system with longer waiting times and all that. So I think perhaps, yeah, it's a pointer for us as well to get back to the basics. You know, before we try to reach for the stars. It's not to say that we shouldn't and that carbon credits are not important and, you know, the green economy, another example, especially not too long ago, we were at a IATA conference that mentioned the fact that SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, the opportunities in Africa are immense in terms of that. Yet in South Africa, we lost some refinery capacity just recently. So I think it's getting the balance right between, and James, you said it perfectly, the bread and butter and the nice to have. So I think we mustn't lose sight of that. But for sure that we must get the basics right. And here, once again, I think we can learn so many lessons from Singapore and what you did in the last, you know, 30 to 50 years in terms of your development is getting the basics right, so that just the general ease of doing business is at such a high level that we will not talk about, you know, standing times and long processing times at border and all of these things. We'll get at a quicker opportunity to CBAM, to carbon credits, to IMO and all of that. So I think it's just some pertinent reflection opportunity for us here in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the entire team. I want to go through just one quick round, just a final comment from our very, very informative panelists. If we could just maybe start with Singapore side and come all the way to South Africa. So maybe Chibun, just give us final pointers to our Singapore companies who are, you know, really interested in the region and just need that guidance.
Yeah, I mean, Africa, with the populations that have already been mentioned, I think one key point is really the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to really besides exporting out to the world, but as a market itself, with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, that's going to be huge. So that is definitely a place to be in. And you have 54 countries to choose your base with. I think that to me is a plus side. Yep.
Thanks, Chibun. Roy?
Thanks. I'd say that many countries in Africa, or at least the ones I've dealt with, are really looking to transform themselves. So diversifying their economies away from the traditional drivers like oil and gas. In Angola, for example, they're looking more at tourism. And, I think so this sort of shifts in government policy or strategy would lead to new opportunities. So I think we should always keep a lookout for these and see where we can support and help.
Thanks, Roy. Yonita?
Yeah, I think for me, it's nice to participate in this webinar and to engage with the colleagues from Singapore. But I think we as people in the logistics network, there's a huge calling on our lives, because we realized for the first time in many decades that the logistics network with the air, road, ocean, rail is the enabler for growth and jobs. And I think that's what we need to always remind ourselves. The little role we can play in digitalization and what you do now with advocacy, with awareness, we must never underestimate that, because it's just a small step in the right direction that will help us to make sure that we can take the huge opportunities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. James?
Sorry, yeah. Just to build up on what Yonita has spoken about, there's huge opportunity in Africa, and probably sounding like a broken guitar. Needs presence, needs persistence, needs an exploratory explorer's attitude. The Chinese have done it, in a way that is quite amazing. They are all over us here. So Singapore, there are opportunities. There are opportunities in East Africa, West Africa, things that you'll readily relate to. But then again, requires presence, requires visits. Take the plunge, visit and make out for yourselves, and then be able to suss out all these opportunities that will be available there. So that's all I'm saying. Come to Kenya. We're waiting for you. Thank you
so much, James. Thanks, James. Dr. Jacob?
The final thought, and thank you for this, and once again, thank you for the opportunity to participate. It's been a really robust discussion. I want to say that I want to echo some of the sentiments said, in that in Africa it's a lion's world. It's a lion's world, but I think the growth opportunities are immense. It's a massive market. We have 1.3 billion people, most of whom are very young and who are jumping on the technological wave. And I want to frame this opportunities to say that in the last month, we had a first in Africa. We had the first deployment of an ultra-large container vessel, more than 18,000 TEUs, that went to Togo to the port of Lomé. That's the first time ever that some of the lucrative East-West trades, they have shifted their ultra-large vessels to Africa. Now, this might be a once-off, but what I'm saying in the fact that if these things are starting to happen, you can know that Africa is a market waiting to boom, really. And like James said, come to Kenya, come to South Africa. We've got a great business environment here, but I think the opportunities in Africa are immense. And if we link the logistics network with the right industries, with the right people, and there are some in this call for sure, then I think the opportunities are endless. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think I'll hand over to Kujo. I don't know if we've had a few questions on our chat side. You want to run on the Q&A side, just see whether we might have some questions or some fresh ones from the floor.
And thanks. We don't have any questions in the chat, but folks that are still online, feel free to ask any question, can ask directly to any panelist. if it's a general question, feel free also to address it to Anne, and I'm confident that she will ricochet it accordingly. Do you have any questions? By show of hands. Sophie, are they able to type into the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
If the participant have any question, actually they can post in our Q&A. If not, please also feel free to reach out to any of our colleagues here. We are more than happy.
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Thanks, Sophie.
Sophie, I note you put up the poll. So meaning as the team is responding to the poll, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists, Chibun, Roy, Dr. Jacob, Juanita, James, awesome discussion. Thank you so much for the sharing, nice, rich sharing. I'm gonna mention to our Singapore companies, we'll share contacts in case you have any clarifications, questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. Kujo, anything else you might want to tell to our team, to our companies, please feel free. And once you're done, you do the final thanks, I think, before we close.
Thanks again. And yeah, so guys, to Singapore companies, I think you've heard all of the opportunities. Well, not all of them, but we've heard about a lot of opportunities that exist in Africa. There are challenges as well, but there are ways of getting around those challenges. So we shouldn't be crippled by that. I think that is the strongest message that came out. And if there are any follow-up questions or if there are any requests for discussions, please feel free to reach out to Enterprise Singapore, any one of us. We've got good representations in Southern Africa, East Africa, North, as well as West Africa. So we are here for you, and our colleagues, friends are also here for all of us. So yeah, thank you so much once again. And should we close?
Over to you, you can close.
Pity we can't have a cocktail party after this.
Thank you
All right,
much,
thank you
guys.
so much for
Lovely afternoon,
guys.
lovely evening. Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you,
having me.
colleagues.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.